Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Secretary, for taking questions from us. Mr. Secretary, first to you. You've traveled throughout the region. As you know, China has a growing presence throughout the Caribbean and Latin America. You carried out an effort to limit a Hong Kong company's presence in the Panama Canal, and you talked with some reservations about Chinese projects yesterday in Jamaica. I was wondering, is it the aim of the Trump administration to try and have the two superpowers reach an accommodation or an understanding where each power limits their military, diplomatic, and economic presence in the backyards of the other powers, meaning spheres of influence for each power? And then related to China, in 2019, you supported legislation to have the U.S. government support the protesters in Hong Kong, the pro-democracy protesters. And mostly the protests are peaceful, but also occasionally they disrupted public life. And so based on your rationale for deporting campus protesters in the U.S., would you now support the Chinese Communist Party or Hong Kong authorities deporting foreigners who took part in those protests in 2019?
Yeah, the first question is silly because the people that we're getting rid of in our country are vandalizing. They're not protesters, they're taking over college campuses, they're harassing fellow students. We let them in our country to study. We gave them a visa because they said, I want to go to your university, I want to get a degree. They didn't say, I want to go to university and I want to vandalize your library and I want to chase Jewish students down the street and I want to wear a mask over my face like if it's Halloween and terrorize people. We didn't give them a visa to do any of that. So we don't want those people in our country. They're not demonstrating for, they're going beyond demonstration. They are going and they're creating a ruckus. They are creating riots basically on campus, and it's unfair for students. Some of these schools are some of the most expensive schools we have in America. People pay a lot of money to go to these schools. They borrow money to go to these schools, and you can't even go to class because some lunatic who's covering their face is running through campus, spray painting things, harassing people, and they're in my country as a guest. We want them out. Every one of them I find, we're going to kick them out. On your first question, we don't talk about spheres of influence. The United States is an Indo-Pacific nation. We have relationships with Japan, South Korea, the Philippines. We're going to continue those relationships. My problem with China is twofold. The first is in many cases, we don't have American companies that have shown an interest in investing in a country, so they don't show up. You leave them with no option. My second problem is in a lot of these countries, the Chinese companies go in, they do a terrible job. Not a bad job, a terrible job. I just came from Guyana where we had to drive on a road the Chinese built. You were on the trip with us?
Yep.
Or did you have to go on this road?
Yeah.
Okay, we almost all had concussions because the road was so bad. It was terrible. They paid these people to build this road and then they bring their workers. They don't hire you. They bring their workers in to do all the work. And then, or they want you to borrow a bunch of money and then they hold it over your head. So what I want is for countries to have an alternative to that. What we want is for countries to have an alternative to that. If you're going to build a road, I want you to have a real road. They were better off with the dirt road than the road we were just on. And it's not the fault of the current administration. You know, in Guyana, that was a road that was built before, but they did a terrible job. If you did that job in America, someone would sue you for a lot of money. Okay? It was a bad road. So we want to be able to ensure that we are providing alternatives to what we think is bad work by the Chinese that never finishes on time, is always over budget, and brings their own workers, don't even hire the locals. And one more point I would make in this regard. There are certain sectors, okay, when it comes to telecommunications and so forth, where I'm just honest with people. If you're going to have a telecommunications system that is controlled by Chinese companies, you're going to have trouble having American investors come in because they don't want all their stuff stolen. They don't want all their stuff yanked out by some back door that the Chinese have installed in their telecommunications system. Again, we've had to face that too in America because Huawei was deploying in America as well. Again, we have to have an alternative though. There has to be somebody else that comes along and says, we can do it too, and we won't spy on you when we do it. So our goal is twofold: create these options, but not just options that don't, that are to China, options to work that involves bad workmanship, over budget, with debt attached, and using their own workers instead of yours. That's the alternative we want to provide in any endeavor we can.